Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with the Texas legislature. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and today we're trying something a little different. This podcast focuses on policy and how Texans of faith can be better advocates for public policies that you care about. But we've been talking for months, if not years, about the importance of civic engagement and participating in elections to achieve the policy outcomes you desire. Texas Impact is in the middle of 3 events to kick off our Houston Faith Votes campaign in partnership with local congregations and organizations in Houston. The first event was last weekend at Congregation Beth Israel, and we have 2 more scheduled for August 26th at Brentwood Baptist Church and August 27th at Servants of Christ United Methodist Church. And I had a chance this last weekend to moderate a faith panel with 4 incredible Houston faith leaders discussing the importance of civic engagement and why and how local congregations can engage their communities. That conversation was so rich and deep, we wanted to share it with the whole Texas Impact community. So we decided to run it as the podcast this week. The panel featured Reverend Dr. Angela Raven Anderson, Social Justice Ministry Lead at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, Reverend James Grace, the Dean of West Harris Convocation and Rector of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, Reverend Stephanie Wilkins, Associate Pastor of Social Justice Ministry at St. John's Downtown, and Judge Manpreet Singh, a judge in Harris County Civic Court No. 4 and a leader in the Sikh community. I hope you enjoy the conversation and share it with your congregations. And then, I hope you'll go check out the tools at texasimpact.org to find out how you and your congregation can get involved in supporting democracy in Texas. As they're making their way up, first of all, hey friends, how's everybody feeling? All right, that's good. Y'all can talk back, it's all right. So Katie did give a shout out to the podcast. I will say over the course of the last few weeks, we've been doing a legislative wrap-up series where we've had members of the Texas legislature come on and talk about different issues and how they played out in Austin over the course of this last year. And one of the things many of them have said is how important it is for people of faith, for mainstream people of faith, to be involved in the process, to speak out, to use your voice, to provide another view of religion than the Christian nationalist voices we sometimes hear. And so it's good for my soul to see you all here today, but I think this is the opportunity for faith leaders to give us the same message about how important it is that we raise our voices and how important it is to engage in the public policy discourse and especially to engage in elections. And so I'm just the few minutes we had a chance to chat outside, I'm really excited for this panel and hope we will be challenged by the words that they'll share with us this afternoon. Y'all ready? Are y'all ready? Oh, that's good, because I don't know what we do if you said no. All right. So the first question, just to get us warmed up, to set a framework for the rest of the day, for the workshops that take place, for the work we're going to do when we go home. I'd love for, and I'm going to start from this side. So Reverend Wilkins, get ready. You're going to be first up, right? What from your faith tradition do you point to when talking about the importance of participating in democracy and specifically talking about voting?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm of a faith that believes in call and response. So I'm going to try that again. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yes,
there we go.
Thank you. That's the energy I needed. Okay. My faith tradition is one of being an ordained deacon in the United Methodist Church. And my orders are service, word, compassion, and justice. So it is my call to serve in every capacity. It is also my call to show compassion and to seek justice. And so for me, Jesus is the example for me. Jesus, I say, if Jesus were here today in the 21st century in body, I feel that Jesus would probably be a first responder. He'd probably be on the fire department, fire chief, or something like that, because he always went where the trouble was. He always went in the direction of the oppressed and the suppressed and the distressed and all the others. And so for me, it is my call to go wherever I see that there is a need. And so voting there is a need. There's a need to vote. There's a need to stay engaged. It's not just enough to cast your vote and go home. You need to know who you're voting for. You need to be educated about who has your interest at heart. And you need to care about more than just your interest. If somebody is hurting, you don't say, well, that's not on me. Well, I didn't hurt them, but anybody who needs help, if we are in the same family and we're in the family of God as believers, I believe, then if somebody is hurting, if someone needs help, then what else should we be doing other than applying that?
Right.
Was that a good answer?
I love it. Y'all think that's a good answer? She wants some feedback. All right.
Thank you.
All right, Judge Sting, same question.
Okay, so I guess, the lawyer in me wants to make the stipulation that I'm not here representing myself as a part of the judiciary and speaking on behalf of that. But ironically, too, in our religion, I'm from the Sikh faith. We don't have the same structural environment that a lot of religions in the West have. And it's actually fascinating when I walk into any type of organization, such as I was actually talking to you when I was here. I was like, this is like really cool. It's everything's structured. They have like a school and it blows me away even, when I was campaigning, going to churches and seeing that structure because we do not have that. And so when we talk about, what does our faith look like when it comes to voting or democracy? My faith is one of the newer religions. It was born in the 1400s and very democratic in itself. And in fact, we have no caste system. We have gender equality, socioeconomic equality. So on its face, democracy looks like it jives with us. In practice, we as the people do not exercise our right to vote as we should. And actually, I was talking to Reverend Wilkins earlier here. I think that there's just different layers and levels of what happens as immigrants here in a different country. We all come from countries that don't trust our government, they think their vote doesn't matter, it's corrupt or whatever it is. So the value in voting is not there for us. And so that's actually a huge disservice, not to just the cities that we live in, but really to the religious belief that we subscribe to, because we really do believe in that concept of democracy, but don't exercise it.
Right. Okay. Y'all love that? You'll buy it? All right, we're still going. All right, Dr. Raven Anderson.
Well, I guess when I think about my faith tradition, I'm here, sitting here as a person who's part of an African-American Baptist church in the South. And what does that mean? That means a lot. That means that our churches were safe places. They were born in the bush harbors, meaning they were places where people gathered away from the master on the plantation. And so what happens for us in church is Reverend Leslie spoke of this idea of the idea of our liberation is very tied to our understanding of who God is and the role that God serves in our lives as a liberator, physically liberating us, but continuously liberating our minds, liberating us so that we can prosper and go forward. So with that said, it becomes part of the understanding in your faith tradition that to move forward as a believer in that freedom, you have to stand in places sometimes. The scripture says that you have to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. So that's part of the tradition, particularly among Baptists, I would say, African-American Baptists, I would say, that stands very strong, is that you take on this mantra of standing for those who cannot and speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves. And for us in this country, that happens in the way that we vote. That's part of how we do that, not only in our personal polity, but because our personal polity gets played out into systems and structures, then it's important that we go and we show our thoughts, our philosophies, our beliefs are reflected in those systems and structures. And again, that happens as part of when we go to cast your vote, that you're casting your vote with that same mentality in mind.
Man, we buy that one too? We're good? All right. Reverend Grace.
Jesus always sought out the marginalized, and he always sought out those who were in the corners and those who were outsiders, and those were the people that he was always drawn to. And so that's the person in my faith tradition that I look to, especially when I think about voting. But there are many, many others. One of them, Dr. Martin Luther King, who I want to read this quote because I don't want to incorrectly state it, but he said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And voting matters, and how we come together as a community matters. And that's really important to me. As an Episcopalian, I have both the pride, but also the baggage of being part of a denomination that was very formative and influential at the beginning of the creation of our United States government. The Episcopal Church was very involved in that, and the bicameral legislature was based upon the way that the Episcopal Church was set up, which is great, but also it was all white men. Many of whom were owned slaves. And so there's all of that baggage that comes with it. And so, as we come together today to discuss this, we bring all of our tradition with us. And I'm grateful to be part of a diverse community that we can have these conversations.
Right, thank you. I'm going to open this. I'm not going to call on y'all this time. I'm going to trust that somebody's going to be feeling it here. But a couple of you talked about marginalized voices. We talked about people who cannot speak for themselves. And the next topic I want us to cover is who gets left out? Who gets left vulnerable if we choose not to participate in democracy? Who is harmed if people of faith, people of good conscience don't vote?
I want to take this one because it's something I actually see the manifestation in. And by the way, I'm newly elected, so I'm still green and excited about life, right? So I'm telling that stipulation too, because I really start to notice a lot of things and the difference as to why the process matters and why the participation in the process matters. So the court that I serve in actually has half and half. Like we'll have half the people that are lawyers and half the people that come and represent themselves. And so when you are going in front of a judge who doesn't have an experience or the same experience or similar or a friend of a similar experience or any knowledge of it, it really makes a difference. And I think without us, with our conscience, looking out for those marginalized community, voting for the people that make up diverse benches, legislatures, or whatever, it really does affect everyday life. And, part of the issues that we've had since COVID have been evictions. And so we see a large number of evictions. And when I hear somebody who's an immigrant who speaks to me or they say something to me, I'm always like, oh, I know that that's what that person is saying, but that's not what they're saying, right? Because it's a second language. Their body language is different. The way that people act and react are different. And I say that to say is I value the vote that everybody put in for me to be there to help identify that and help whoever it is that's in that position that needs that help. So if that doesn't motivate us to look out so that way we can have these voices and the eyes from different perspectives, really we're really not helping the people around us. And that to me matters the most.
There's a scripture in James that says, pure religion is this, to take care of the widow and the orphan. In other words, those who are most vulnerable in your society. So when you ask that question, who's left out, the most vulnerable are always left out. And those who are in power then have the free reign to make decisions that benefit themselves with little regard for those who have no power. So it becomes incumbent upon those who have a moral conscience and a moral bend toward those who are without and those who are on those margins, those who are disenfranchised, who don't feel that they even have a place or a voice within the system to speak up on their behalf. So just like right now, we're in Houston, Texas, in the fight of our lives with our HISD for children who cannot have a voice for themselves. So it becomes incumbent upon those who have a voice to use it, not to be silent, but to use that voice on behalf of others.
And I want to piggyback on, give her props. Yes, did that. Do that. I want to piggyback on what my pastor sister said, in that when we who have the opportunity to vote don't do so, it is the ones who are coming up who don't yet have the opportunity to vote. I'm looking at the children. I'm looking at the teenagers. I'm looking at those young adults who are so disenfranchised by how we play politics that they don't even realize how much they are impacted by the laws, by the bills, by the elected officials who then only, some of them, we got to speak truth today, they only cater to those who paid into their campaign, or they only cater to those who have their interests at heart. And for those who take the position but don't understand that they are elected officials, that they are servants of the people. And so then they get in there and they have their own private agendas, then it impacts us all ultimately, because if you disenfranchise, if you marginalize, if you make it so that people cannot live, everybody wants to survive. You're going to do whatever you have to do to survive and thrive, be it legal or illegal. So when you have people who feel so not heard, not seen, invisible, it impacts us all to some degree, because now what we're doing, we're moving out of fear. We're moving out of anxiety. We see everybody as a threat. We see everybody as something, oh Lord, I got, that's how we're actually voting now. That false narrative about, if you let them come over, they're going to take everything you got. That's not true. No, everybody just wants to live. They want to be at peace. Everybody just wants to have what we called the American dream, but it's turned into a nightmare. So we have to do what we have to do to make sure that those coming up behind us have something to live for and to live into and to want to make things better. We keep trying to erase that painful part of our history. We need to sit down, look at it, learn from it, and do better than what we've done before. I'm sorry, I got a little heated up.
Hey, man, you go.
The only thing I would add is just, I think who's at risk if we're not voting. I think not only the vulnerable, but I would say all of us. I think we're all at risk. Malcolm X once said, if you thrust a knife into my back 9 inches and you only pull it out 3 inches, that's not progress. And if you pull the knife all the way out, that's still not healing the wound. Healing the wound is progress, and America has not yet pulled the knife out. And I think part of what we do when we vote and when we vote our conscience is we're part of that healing process. And it's a long process of healing, but we're all, as Americans, I think that's our duty. That's what I believe we're called to do, is to be people of healing and people of peace, rather than people of division.
Yeah. I think y'all are right that, can we all agree that our democracy would work better if it was representing the entirety of our community and not just a small segment that shows up? Right? And I hope we can also all agree that one of the roles of communities of faith should be to make sure that the marginalized voices, that the marginalized people in our community are cared for. We can all agree with that? Can we all agree that the people in this room probably aren't the target audience for turn out the vote campaigns, right? But what I do think is that the people in this room recognize that are people who can go back and mobilize our faith communities to engage our entire community, that our houses of worship, that our congregations, that our communities have a role to play in making sure that every person in our community is participating in democracy so that every voice, every marginalized voice, every human is cared for and protected in the legislative process, right? And so the next question, I guess, is how do we do that, right? What does it look like if our congregations of our communities are actively engaged in democracy, in elections, in voting? And how much better, what would our community look like if that happened? How do we do it, and what would it look like if we did it well? Anybody?
The first thing we have to do is stop playing like we don't know what's wrong. Everybody, I go to a lot of think tanks and discussions and of people of different origins, ethnicities, and the first thing that some will say is, well, what can I do? I'm just one person, or I vote. First, we got to stop acting like we don't know what's wrong. We know what's wrong. You have to see everybody of sacred worth and value, first of all. You have to understand that, to some degree, my pain, you have to connect with that. I'm not saying you have to feel it to the same way that I do, but you have to stop ignoring the fact that I feel it. You have to stop trying to convince people that they're not hurting when they're hurting. You have to understand that there's a reason why people are angry. You got to understand there's a reason why people are protesting, because when you're not seen and not heard, then you do whatever you have to do to get seen and get heard. So what I love about today is the fact that you've invited organizations that are in the struggle. Figure out what it is that calls to you, because something calls to you. You don't have to be a woman to care about women's issues. You don't have to be LGBTQIA to understand that they just want to live. You don't have to be Black to say that Black lives matter. You have to stop being afraid to speak the truth to power and to one another. We've got to have these uncomfortable conversations. January the 6th, 2021 erased every illusion that I had that things were truly getting better. What I found out was that the hatred had gone underground. And then when that person was in office and he spoke what was in some people's hearts, it was okay for them to hate out loud again. And it hurts me to know that we've come so far, but we still have so very far to go. Because until you understand that voting is your voice and you've got to empower everybody, we're going to keep fighting. We're not going to stop, but we do get weary. So if you want to be a part of the solution, find one of these organizations that speak to you. Stop being silent about those things that matter to others. We are in the family of God, and as so, God said, love me first with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Who is your neighbor? You are your brother and sister's keeper. You are. That's the only reason we're here, is to help each other on this earthly journey until we transition. So I hope I made some sense. I don't know. Get active. Speak up. Stand up. Show up.
I thought that was great. I'm actually going to push you a little further, though. I'm staying with you. I'm going to push you. So what do you feel? I'll push them next. So what do you feel like the role of the church of communities of faith is in that? Is it partnering with the other organizations? What do you wish congregations who are represented here would do?
Well, first of all, I was going to say, and I told Reverend Wilkins this, I have community envy because, when the African American community is figuring out when to vote, it's because they're like, oh, wait, an election's coming up. Let me get my stuff together. And our community doesn't care, period. We don't own this country yet. The first hate crime after 9/11, and a lot of hate crimes right behind the Jewish faith are against Sikh men and women, right? Because we have turbans and it invokes people to believe somehow that we're part of the Al-Qaeda network. So my son's back there, he's got a turban. And, these are things that I grew up thinking about with my dad and my brother and my kids. And, we do not own this country yet. We are constantly told to go back where we came from. We are constantly told that this is not our country. I was born and raised here in Houston, Texas. And growing up, and everywhere I go still to this day, he's like, where are you from? And I'm like, the north side of Houston. No, where are you really from? No, I went to Klein Forest High School. I mean, I literally am from here. We have to own this country to be accountable in this country. And I think that that's the difference, is that we have to make sure that we account for one another. And I think one of the things that I learned, and I loved this tool that we were given during this election cycle, is the Reach app. And it's the app that goes straight into your phone and it pulls out your contacts to see if they voted or not. It doesn't tell you how, but it tells you if they did. And that accountability app is something I used within my own community. And I feel like, and I'm saying my own community is within the Sikh community, but my own community within my own friends, right? We have to keep each other accountable because people lie to you, right? Yeah. They're like, oh, I already voted. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And we'll do it because we got caught. But we won't do it because you asked us to. And I honestly think when it comes to a tool, a real tool as to what happens, this to me, and I've been really involved in community for over 30 years. I've always done the voting thing and everything. But this single tool that we just got recently has changed the way in which I've been able to approach my friends and held them accountable. It helped I was on the ballot too, but yeah, but that's definitely something I would push at every congregation. I mean, obviously getting them registered to vote, but making sure that they actually go to the ballot box.
Now that I know that you're a Klein Forest alum, we'll have to talk later, but
unfortunately, I know in some Christian traditions, there was a teaching that bifurcated participation or your understanding of your citizenship with your role as a Christian. It downplayed the importance of earthly citizenship. You're to be focused on your heavenly citizenship. And I think that is erroneous. That is not really, when you look at the teaching of what we see Jesus doing. Jesus was very much so involved in what was going on in the everyday lives of the people that were going on. And he was very much so speaking to the power structures that were in place at that time. So when you say, as churches or communities of faith, one thing is to understand that we do have a role in the political process. I think oftentimes there's always kind of been this, separation of church and state. Well, possibly, but the only way that we're going to be salt and light in the world is to be involved in the world. We're not to be placed under a bushel. Our light, our witness, however it is that we express our faith, has to be out loud. Our pastor calls it, he says, our God doesn't need undercover Christians. He needs those who are going to be out loud with your beliefs and out loud with how you're living, that what your life choices, your life decisions should reflect everything that you have come to understand about the teachings of our master.
All right. I'll preach.
I was just going to say, I think Congregation Beth Israel is doing a really good job of showing us what congregations that are engaged in democracy look like. And the only thing that I would add to it is, and I say this full disclosure that the parish I serve, we have not yet done this, but I think congregations are great places to be hosting voter registration drives, and that's something that that we will do at St. Andrews. I do have a member who. A parishioner who's a deputy voting registrar, and she attends many of our elections, and so that's something that we will do, and something that I think congregations can do to really increase the word.
All right, appreciate it. We have a couple minutes left, and I'm not sure we have enough time to get to the next question on my outline. So if you listen to the podcast, you'll know I like to ask our guests what the homework is each week. So I'm going to give you all just a quick second to close us out. My kids went back to school this week, and they were dreading having homework. How many of y'all feel like you need some homework today? There's only a couple. Let's try that again. You came to this event hopefully to do something. How many of y'all feel like you need some homework today? All right, much better. So Reverend Grace, we'll start to you. Come back this direction. So our next section, or coming up soon, will be breakouts where folks can learn some tools and resources that you can use to partner with in your local congregation and go back and do things. But one thing that you'd leave with the group, one thing that you hope they'll do when they head home back to their local congregation or community.
To be courageous.
Yeah. What's that look like? What do you mean by that?
To be courageous, as I think about it in this particular context, is to be able to speak our truth and to know that our truth is our truth, and that we shouldn't feel ashamed for having our opinions, whatever our opinions are, and that we should, our congregations ideally should be places where we feel safe to share those, and to be courageous, and to talk about this, and to share this message with our families and our friends.
Love it. Thanks.
I'm hopeful that we will go back and really begin to make the connection between our beliefs and our actions, and understanding again that it's not just an individual, but we are, as Reverend Stephanie pointed out, we all are responsible for each other and taking care of each other. So understanding that our actions have to reflect what we say we believe.
What might that look like?
Well, voter registration drives. I mean, that's a simple way to start. It's partisan. Can you believe it? It's nonpartisan. You can set it up very easily, and it's an easy way just to even begin to make people think, oh, yes, I should think about voting, or I should make sure I take care of this. It's very simple.
Thanks.
I would say take what you've heard today as motivation, and this is what I mean by it. For example, when I come to panels like this and I see congregations like this, I'm like, oh my God, we've got to get better. We're going to do more. And in the converse, you hear stories from the immigrant community or my community, and you say, you know what? I thought that everybody's apathetic, but we're really in a better position. Let's push more forward, right? Like, we're doing great. Let's keep it going. Use that as motivation to take it to the next, because you're really doing something. You showed up here today. So what are you going to do with it? Use what we talked about today as motivation to do what you can for your community, because I know I'm going to do that today.
Excellent. Love it.
It's been rolling. Oh, so sorry. It's been rolling in my head, so I'm getting ready to read it, and I do not like to misquote the word. So I'm going to Micah 6:8. He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. So what does that look like to me? Putting faith into action. That means finding some organization, some group, somebody that's different than you. You've got to come out of the bubble. You've got to be willing to sit before people who you, quote unquote, might see as different from you. And if you're a little bit nervous about that, there are some groups and organizations that you can do that. They have conversations. The Center for the Healing of Racism that is housed on the campus of HCC. They have those kinds of conversations with people of different backgrounds. We've got to start hearing one another, and we've got to start showing up for one another. I'm so glad to see the League of Women Voters, because when I tell you they have one of the most comprehensive programs, if you want to know about voting, if you want to know about elections, if you want to know about elected officials, I don't know, they might work for the CIA, because they get the lowdown on these people. I tell you, they know where their houses are, they know how many children they have, they know what their income level. League of Women Voters is off the chain. There's also a group called Showing Up for Racial Justice, and it's not my words, it's theirs. They said they're white people who are gathering together to help with racial justice. So it's called Showing Up for Racial Justice. Come out of the bubble that's in your head and possibly the bubble that's in your heart, and understand that collectively, we are stronger together. We are going to either thrive or we're going to sink as a country together. It's all of this about you thinking it's not at your door. Yes, it is. It's at your door. It's in your face. It's on your job. It's in your family. I love you. Why? Because you showed up. It shows you care. But beyond that, you've got to have conversations. You've got to keep having conversations. Now, I didn't say beat people over the head. You say it. If they receive it, thank you. If they don't, kick the dust off your shoes. But don't stop talking. Don't stop showing up. We need you. We need every one of you to make this happen.
You know what else that Reverend Wilkins does too to show up is she actually is a precinct chair, which is mobilizing her own district and people too. And, I think, you help your congregation the way you do, but you help your immediate community understand and do that. And small things like being a precinct chair they're actually big things that make an impact. So I definitely think we should highlight the other work you do too.
Thanks. So I had to leave church early this morning to come up here, but I feel like I walked out on my pastor. Don't, tell her. But I feel like I got an extra sermon today, so thank y'all. That was great. Hey, one more round of applause for they were great, right? I really do appreciate the leadership you all are providing in your congregations in this community, and for taking part of your Sunday afternoon to do this. I really do appreciate y'all, and thank y'all for being here. Really look forward to what comes next based on these conversations. So I believe I am now turning it back over to Katie. Thank y'all again. I hope you enjoyed the conversation this week. I know I sure did. And I think the panelists were right. Faith voices should be leading in civic engagement work because marginalized voices are the ones left behind if our communities sit out. I hope we'll all begin to think about the role we can play in engaging our congregations and communities. The Texas Impact team is here for you if you need help figuring it out, so check out our website or email me at scott@texasimpact.org and let's engage in this work together. While you're on the website, I hope you'll consider joining Texas Impact to support this podcast and the work of Texas Impact year-round. Learn more or sign up for one of our teams at texasimpact.org. So with that, I think it's time to close out this episode, so remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.